you're going to have to excuse the voice. I am still croaky. I'm still hoarse. 60 hours after the event, something like that. Anyway, the news carries on relentlessly. I still want to have a discussion about Jared Bowen, about Said Benrahma, and about lots of that other stuff. As I say, I want to sort of keep enjoying the moment for quite a long time. We don't know when it's going to happen again. However, the news carries on. The news moves on. At a very, very fast pace. And the latest story, it's not even a story, these are pretty much confirmed quotes. And David Sullivan doesn't know if David Moyes is going to be sticking around next season. Now, this is one of those situations, I've got to say, where I think both people are right. I think David Moyes is right to wait and see. And have a little look what's around to see if he wants to see out the last year of his contract. I think he's earned that right, as I argued in yesterday's video. I also think David Sullivan's right not to rush in and try and offer him a new deal. Because I do think David Sullivan probably needs to address some of the problems that were there last season. We do waste quite a bit of money. Probably does need to bring in a director of football. But I also understand how this would upset Moyes. And I absolutely think David Moyes has earned the right to see out the last year of his contract. 100%. I really, really do. But there's no way I would be offering him a new long-term deal. The director of football thing, I don't know how big a deal that is, how much this has got to factor in to David Moyes' decision. Maybe it's just not one decision. Maybe there's a load of smaller things. Maybe the Celtic job is appealing to him. Maybe he wants to leave West Ham on a high. Maybe this is as good as it gets. Maybe he is sick living in Canary Wharf and he wants to move back up. I don't think necessarily to Scotland. I think his family home is in Chester. We're certainly a lot nearer to Scotland than we are here. Maybe it's part of that. Maybe it's he likes control of the transfers. We know that. Maybe it's part of that. Maybe he doesn't like the thought of that being taken away from him. It was his decision to appoint Rob Newman. I'm not sure if Rob Newman would retain his job, but Rob Newman would have his job diluted because he's head of recruitment, isn't he? And he would be head of recruitment in title only. That would be it, because realistically he would not be in charge of recruiting players. That would be the director of football that would do that. So Rob Newman would be a glorified scout. Nothing wrong with being a good scout, by the way. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it ain't the same job. It ain't why he was brought in, and that was David Moyes' decision. It's David Moyes' decision to overhaul the recruitment at West Ham. So I can understand why David Moyes might feel his nose been put out of joint by the appointment of a footballing director who, by all intents and purposes, will probably be David Moyes' boss. However, I can also understand why David Sullivan would feel the need to bring someone in. Lost a shed load of money on players like Nikola Vlasic. Even this season, not every transfer has worked out. Absolutely. Look, Paqueta came in and he played his role in the final. And I would say in the last few months, he really has started to adjust to the Premier League. Absolutely. But David Moyes has said numerous times this season that players take a long time to settle in. And I think sometimes that's true. I think sometimes it's not. I've always thought there's other clubs who are not hampered by that same thing. So maybe, just maybe, David Sullivan's looked at it and he's looked at the way that... Look, Mikel Antonio was right, what he said about Scamacca. Absolutely right. I just thought his timing was pretty damn poor, really. And I did think it was undermining the manager. I don't think it's particularly good on Scamacca either. However, it was accurate. Scamacca does not suit David Moyes' tactics. And neither does Danny Ings. And neither did Sebastian Haller, neither did Chicharito. And so I sort of understand. And there are lots of examples of players like that. I understand why the owner might think, look, if we're going to spend the Declan Rice money and a little bit on top, we've got to get it right. We can't have half the signings working out. I've mentioned Areola numerous times, but I think there's a bit of redemption there for Areola. I think it was important that he played him in the final and played him all the way along. Otherwise, it's a lot of money spent. I think that I've mentioned a few times, the overall package in terms of wages, the original loan fee and the transfer fee for Areola is £41.5 million, something like that. It's a big financial commitment for a club like West Ham. And by and large, he's been on the bench this season. And now it looks like, actually, it's bedded in really well. And that's something that's worked out for Moyes. Looks like Paqueta's worked out for Moyes. In the end, looked like Emerson worked out for Moyes. So actually, there is an argument there that a lot of these transfers did work out. But there are big ones. There are, as I say, Danny Ings, 125 grand a week. Skamaka, £35 million player. Vlasic. There's a few of them there. So I understand bringing a director of football. But I do understand. I understand the disappointment David Moyes might have in that as well. I mean, David Moyes said he was, had been sort of wounded. I think he said by Moyes out banner or whatever it was. And again, I would get that. I don't think it's probably not a particularly nice thing to read, is it? And he's probably thinking, well, is this as good as it gets? I think David Sullivan's probably... Look, David Sullivan, the first time around, got rid of David Moyes for footballing reasons, right? David Sullivan knew that he knew that from the fans' perspective, but he also cited that himself. That's why David Moyes wasn't retained after his first stint at West Ham. That's why we got Pellegrini in, for a more expressive, more expansive brand of football. So it does say David Sullivan. Is David Sullivan capable of sacking a manager because he don't play the right type of football? Yeah, he's already proven it. He's proven he can sack David Moyes for not playing the right type of football. However, it's a very different David Moyes now to then. You might remember when David Moyes came in, if you're watching the channel for a while, I said it was like a marriage of convenience. Both people's stock was low. Sullivan's stock was quite low as an owner because we were troubled. We'd moved stadium. We still had quite a lot of debt. This transformation in the club hadn't materialised. Fans were unhappy, clearly unhappy. David Moyes' stock was low as well. Because he'd been booted out of West Ham. He'd got Sunderland relegated. He'd not done so well at Man United. Had the Real Sociedad episode as well. Obviously, that's not in chronological order, but his stock was quite low. And I said at the time, it's a last chance saloon for David Moyes. If David Moyes doesn't get this job right, he probably wouldn't get another one. And the dynamic of the relationship was exactly that. Moyes probably didn't want to go back and work for the guy that had sacked him. And David Sullivan probably didn't want to appoint somebody that he'd already sacked. But it was convenient and it worked for both of them. That's not the case. The dynamics of the relationship are probably quite different now. David Sullivan will probably feel he's on quite a high. He'll probably feel he's been vindicated on the move to the stadium and whatnot. I'm not so sold on all of that myself. I've got to be honest with you. I think I'm not saying we've fluked everything. I'm just not sure how much of it has been by design. That being said, we have spent a lot of money. So whether that's due to us moving to the stadium, I don't know. I really don't know. But Sullivan will think his stock would have risen. But the one person whose stock has risen is David Moyes. There's, aside from the ridiculous big clubs, there ain't too many football clubs now who probably wouldn't want David Moyes. I think most clubs. Let's say most. There are some. Look, we can list off quite a few. Would Brighton want him? No. Would Man United want him? No. There's a list of clubs that wouldn't want him. But the next manager gets sacked from Premier League club, if David Moyes was free, he'd be at the forefront in the list of replacements. Because people, can he rescue a team from relegation? Yes. Can he deliver silverware? Well, the answer is yes. So his stock is very, very high at the moment. And he's not in the same position. And I wouldn't be surprised if David Moyes probably looks at this and thinks, well, I've had a really nice time at West Ham. And I think he's finished there. It was never as good as it has been on Wednesday night for him. And he's probably thinking, actually, do I need all this crap again? Do I need all this? Do I need having the rug pulled out from under my feet in terms of transfers? He's probably thinking no. I absolutely get it. But by the same token, I think if I was the owner, because of things like Vlasic, because of things like Skamaka, Ings, and all that other stuff, I'd be really looking for some proper assurances before I started giving the new manager whatever it might be, whatever we get for Declan Rice, and be it 100 million, and then we get another 50 million on top. I don't know what the budget's going to be. But I understand why you'd want to put another buffer zone in there. And my goodness, West Ham do need to modernise. I'm pleased seeing us doing it. I hate the thought of us not getting a director of football in, actually, and David Sullivan taking over transfers again. That I don't particularly want either. I think we should have a structure. I think we should have a strategy. I think we do need to overhaul how things are going on from academy level upwards in terms of, we've got a really good group of young players there. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to be decided. And David Sullivan, because David Moyes on a one-year contract, has bought himself the luxury of waiting. David Sullivan's made it clear, I'm not going to offer David Moyes a new contract until next summer. So he's going to wait another year. Now, that does not smack of somebody that's willing to put David Moyes on a big deal. And I get that David Moyes probably deserves a little bit more, but I think David Moyes deserves to see out his contract. I'm struggling to think of a scenario where you give David Moyes 5 years or whatever, whatever whopping on contract. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. But I think one thing that didn't particularly play out is would be in a situation where David Moyes would say, actually, I'm not sure. I thought a lot of us would be in a position at the end of the season where maybe the club would decide whether or not they wanted to retain David Moyes. And it's just funny how the power balance has shifted, because it may well be David Moyes says, actually, I'm not sure I want to stay. And I get it, and I'd honestly, I'd hold no grudges, and I think he could leave with his head held high if he did that. Again, I'm not writing his obituary here. I'm not saying he's out the door, but the noises coming out of David Sullivan, coming out of the club yesterday and today, do not smack of people that are confident David Moyes is going to stay. Somebody says 50-50 at the moment, whether David Moyes is going to stay or not. I don't know, maybe it is that. Who knows? But one thing I do hope, if it is 50-50, 50% chance of keeping your manager is still a 50% chance of losing your manager. So I hope, with that in mind, I hope they've done some decent planning about who they're going to get in as a replacement. I think it makes it doubly important that we do bring in the director of football. But whatever happens, it's going to be a real season of change at West Ham. And as I said yesterday, whether David Moyes stays, whether he goes, I do think he can hold his head up high and say, you know what, I went to West Ham and I did a bloody good job.